Welcome to the Athlete Mental Health Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Schmidt, off-road endurance athlete and mental health mentor. If you're really serious about getting that next PB, you can't overlook taking care of your mental health. Because although mental health and sport performance might seem completely unrelated, when you look at how your body actually works, you'll find out that they're two sides of the same coin, which means prioritizing your mental health will boost your sport performance. I'll dive deep into the scientific connections between mental health and sport performance and give you practical strategies that will get you to the root of your depression and anxiety so that you can feel your best and perform even better. Hey team, welcome to the Athlete Mental Health Podcast, or welcome back if you are a regular listener. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We are, as always, have a great topic to chat about. But first, I'd like to wish you a happy new year because this is the first time that I'm tuning in solo in the new year. So excited. I hope you had a really great holiday season. Hope you were able to take some rest, to get recharged, which is exactly what we're going to talk about today. And so if you didn't get that, hopefully this episode will help you to maybe start to think about what that's actually going to look like for you so that you can start to, have some energy, feel like yourself, and kind of come alive in your own person again, which is really exciting. So that is what we're going to dive into today, rest and recharge. But I know that the holiday season, it sounds in theory as we're going into it, we're like, oh yeah, like we don't have to work a whole lot. There's a lot of holidays. Maybe you take the whole time off. But for some people, it's really relaxing. Like some people take a really chill vacation and go hang out maybe at the beach or at the cabin or whatever, and they just curl up and read books for 2 weeks, or they connect with people that they really care about and their cup feels really full. And for other people, it totally depends on who you are. For other people, the holiday season can be a little bit stressful. There's a lot of travel. Maybe you actually do have to work while everybody else is not working, and there's some pressure there for you. Whatever that looks like, I know that it can be a really interesting time of year for people. And so diving into the new year, and we're about halfway through January now as this is being recorded, I'm hoping that this will give you some perspective on what kinds of things you can actually do to fill your energy cup, because there are way too many people, especially endurance athletes. I think we're really, really guilty of this. Too many of us wandering around just kind of like on autopilot, going through the monotonous steps of day by day. Like, we make that joke about like, oh, what have you been up to or whatever. And it's like, yeah, like sleep, eat, train, work, sleep, eat, train, work, right? We just kind of like go through the motions. And I don't want you to have to live like that because, we do have to have we need some routine. We need some pretty tight scheduling because the schedules of endurance athletes can be pretty rigid. But I want you to also still be able to find some like zest and some energy and inspiration and things within the confines or within the schedule. So I want you to really be thinking about that as we go through, and resting and recharging is one piece of that puzzle that's actually going to help you to kind of like light that fire in you again so that you actually don't just feel like you are a zombie and cruising around and not really totally engaged in your life, disconnected from yourself, disconnected from the people around you, and just existing. I don't want that for any of you. I want you all to be like 100% in it, energized, and feeling really good about it. Not that it's like fake or a face that you put on when you go out into the world. So I want to talk today about the difference between resting and recharging. What I see with a lot of people is that you go through your work week. We're just going to use the classic example of working like your Monday to Friday, and you get to the weekend and you are like have all these things that you're either going to do. So you're really busy, maybe you have lots of training, you have family commitments, whatever. Or you're like, yeah, I'm going to take a day to just like relax. And that relax day doesn't fill you up. Like maybe let's imagine it's Sunday and then you get the Sunday scaries and then it's like, oh my God, you wake up Monday morning, you're exhausted and you have to start the week again. I don't know if this sounds familiar to you. I think a lot of people go through this where either their weekends are jammed full or they have the intention of having some sort of relaxation, and that relaxation doesn't actually leave them feeling fulfilled or energized in any way, shape, or form, and maybe potentially even more drained. And then you're left wondering like I had all of this time to chill. Like, why am I not feeling relaxed? Or like, you come home after work, for example, and maybe after a training ride or a run or something, you like crash on the couch and just like watch Netflix for the evening. And you're like, yeah, this is me just like chilling. This is relaxing. This is going to energize me. And then you still feel tired or sometimes even more tired. And so the reason for this is because there is a really, really big difference between rest, or like I'm going to call it also relaxation, and recharging. So let's dive into what that difference is and how you can actually start to take some control over that for yourself so that you are feeling more energized and not just draining the cup by spending time doing certain things. If you have been around here for a while in some sort of space, whether the podcast, maybe on my social media, my email list, you know I love a really good analogy. I've got a great analogy for you today to be able to help you to distinguish the difference between rest and recharging. So here it is. I want you to imagine that you are going to run yourself a beautiful, lovely bath. Okay. So maybe you came in from a really cold, I don't know, I do this. You come in from outside doing a cold run and it feels really good, but like you got that just that little chill. So you're going to run the bathtub. Okay. So you run the bathtub, it's the perfect temperature, and you get it to that perfect level in your bathtub where the water's not overflowing, the drain isn't making like funny sounds because there's too much water in the tub, but it's not so low that you are a little bit chilly still. So you can just like really sink into it. Okay. This bathtub water level is perfect. And that is what we are hoping for with our energy. So the water in the bathtub represents your energy and your energy levels. And so the goal is that we want to try to actually keep the bathtub water at that kind of energy level, or at that water level in the tub. Okay. In our lives, that's us trying to keep our energy there. But realistically in our lives, every day you're going to exert energy, right? You're training, which is going to exert energy. You're working. You probably are doing something with family, or at least managing your own schedules. You're running around, you're doing stuff. Okay. You're not just like never doing anything, never draining energy. So in our lives, that bathtub water, unfortunately, is going to drain every day. Okay. And it's not unfortunate. It's just that we're always going to be draining that tank. Okay. Draining the bathtub, coming down. What happens is when we get to, say, the weekend, we put the plug in. Okay. So during the week, we take the plug out, we let the water drain slowly throughout the week, or maybe really fast throughout the week. And then on the weekends, we put the plug in and the water stops draining. And in our minds, we're like, I'm resting. I'm getting my stores back here. But the problem is that if you put the plug in only and the water is drained, you're not doing anything to actually take that water back up to that really nice optimal level, right? You're only stopping the water from draining from the tub. So when we do things like sitting in front of the TV and binge watching things, maybe it's scrolling through social media, maybe it's even just something like going out for dinner with your family or your friends or something like that. That's just kind of like one of those, I'm going to say, especially family, like out of necessity. You're like, I don't want to cook. Maybe you order in, maybe you just go and sit in a restaurant and you just kind of like, you're not super engaged with everybody. You're just there to perform the purpose of eating. Like that's all, that's the only reason you're there. It's not really a fulfilling experience. So thinking about all of these things that you do that are just kind of like flat, right? So that's when you put the drain in, or sorry, put the plug in the drain, and then your energy levels just, your water level just stays. And then you start your week again and your water levels start to drain. And then you put the plug in on the weekends or the evening, whatever. And this process just keeps happening. So then all of a sudden, we're feeling totally sapped. We're drained. We have no motivation. We're not inspired. Everything feels hard. Just like everything's a chore. Maybe we're short with the people we love and care about. We're not present when we're connecting with these people. So we're like disconnected from the world. We're disconnected from ourselves. All of this stuff is happening and we're going like, why is this the case? Right? Why are we feeling so disjointed and tired and fatigued? And then we automatically assume it's because we're endurance athletes and like, oh, our training is hard and we're doing so much more than the average person, and so we're exhausted. Yes, that's part of the puzzle. Of course, there's going to be some fatigue that comes up from endurance training, and especially if you don't do certain things to help to manage the physiology of that to help you have more energy. That is a topic for a total other day, but you are going to feel tired, right? Endurance sport is going to have that for you. But the problem is that you're never putting any water back in the bathtub. That's what recharging is. Okay. That's what recharging does to us. It helps us to actually fill the bathtub again so that when we start our week or start the next morning, we actually have pretty good levels. Now, we may not always be at that perfect cushy level that I described. That's just the best, right? That's ideal. We might not always be there. But if we're never taking the time to recharge and actually put water back into our bathtubs, then our bathtub is going to be empty and we're going to definitely feel the effects of that. So when I talk about recharging, like what does that actually mean? I want you to actually take a second and think for you, like what is the difference for you between resting and recharging? Like what is something that you feel like really fills you up? What would fill your bathtub up? And sometimes people panic a little bit about this because they think about the things that actually, kind of give them life or make them feel full. And there are things that they're like, ooh, but I don't know if I have the energy for that. Okay. So I'm picturing like one of the things that gives me a lot of energy is like going on a mountain adventure that's not necessarily like tied to training. So it's like maybe it's on the training calendar, but like I'm just gonna go out and do a hike or a run or a really fun bike or just a cool day where I'm like, yeah, like I'm really excited about that. That's physically draining, right? Like sometimes these adventures are a little wild, right? Like I'm an endurance athlete just like you. So maybe I'm going for like a 6 hour bike ride because I want to do this one section of trail that looks really cool. Maybe I'm going for a 25-kilometer trail run because that is a route that I've seen that the views are absolutely spectacular and I'm super excited about it. So in our minds, we're thinking to ourselves, oh, that thing is going to take up a lot of energy, and I don't know if I have the energy for that. And to be fair, your bathtub might be pretty drained, and you might actually need to do some more passive things that are going to recharge you. But also remember that these things are putting water in the bathtub for you. Now, this might not be what like mountain ventures might not be your thing. Doing training days that are not actually structured training days might not fill your cup like they fill mine, and that's totally okay. But I want you to think about some of the things that do. Maybe it is going away for a weekend with your friends, or maybe it's having a cup of coffee with that friend that's really close to you. And in your mind, you're like, oh, I think I'd rather just hole up at home this weekend and rest. But really, when you go out for a coffee with that friend and have the conversations that really feed your soul, whatever that might be, you're actually putting water in the bathtub. So I want you to kind of just start to get away from this idea that the only thing that you can do as an endurance athlete to rest and recover is to just be sedentary. Now, this is really important though, because you also need to rest physically, okay? Like your body does need to rest. You are going to need lots of sleep, okay? That we won't dive into today, but sleep is super, super important for endurance athletes. And you actually need a little bit more than the average human. So think about that. And I don't want you to finish your training session and then be like, oh, the only thing that fills my cup is a 25-kilometer trail run that has 1,000 meters of elevation. So I'm now going to go do that. No. Because that's not going to fill you up either. So we have to find some balance here, but we also need to challenge our mindset a little bit in the sense that we need to start to understand that some of the things that feel like they might be draining are actually putting water back in the bathtub and recharging our energy stores. And so we need to just find that really delicate balance between the two of those things. I want you to just take some time to really think about this for yourself. What are those activities that just like totally light you up, just make you feel so good and you feel really, really refreshed after? So maybe it's hard for you to think about like a specific activity, but maybe you can think about a time recently or hopefully not too far in the past where you really did like your battery felt charged, like you were like, yes, okay, I actually have the energy to take on the things that are coming to me instead of just like using caffeine and sugar maybe to just get through things and grind it out. When was the last time you felt like that? And what was it that you were doing? Now, I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, I went on vacation. Sometimes we need a vacation from our vacation, but a lot of people will be like, oh, well, I went and sat on the beach in Mexico for a week and chilled, and like that's what I needed. But I want you to not just be like, oh, well, I can't go to Mexico all the time and chill because you probably can't. I mean, maybe you can, and that would be amazing and good for you. And I highly encourage you to, if you can do that all the time, go for it. I want you to think about what actually happened on that week that you were away that was recharging for you. Was it that you were outside a lot sitting in the sun? Was it that you were eating enough or maybe a little too much? Because sometimes as endurance athletes, right, we tend to not eat enough. It's really hard sometimes to get all of the calories in, especially around all of the other things and other commitments we have in our lives. Maybe it was because you actually took time to read. I don't know. I love reading. I love laying on the beach and reading. That just like fills my soul up. So maybe it was because you actually got to have a really good laugh. Maybe you went with some friends or some family that you really enjoy spending time with, and you like went out and did fun excursions and just enjoyed yourself and got a little silly and did whatever feels good for you. So I want you to think about whatever that thing is, whatever that period of time where you woke up maybe the next morning, or maybe it's this like midday, and you like were like, oh, yeah, the bathtub is at the perfect level. And or maybe just slightly below. But you know what I'm talking about. Think about those times and what really about it recharged you. This is super, super key because we want to be able to bring these things in micro pieces into our lives. So, like I said, we can't always take a vacation. It's just not realistic. But we can do small things. For sure, we can do small things. So the few things that I do that really just fill my cup that are small, they don't take a ton of time. I make a point every single week, at least once a week, if not more, but it doesn't always fit, but at least once a week, I get up to watch the sunrise. I sunrises just like even if they're not even a good sunrise, there's just something about being outside at the time that every like there's that transition from night to day and these things, and sometimes they land like absolutely spectacular beauty, and those are the mornings that like really fill my cup. But even on just like a cloudy morning where nothing really happens, there's no colors, there's no real anything happening, there's just something about that energy of being out at sunrise that's pretty cool for me. That fills my cup. So that's not a big commitment. Sometimes I walk, right? So that's not physical rest, but it is recharging for me. Okay, so noticing the difference there. Sometimes I'll just sit on the deck. Maybe I'll just walk to a bench that's nearby and then sit there, whatever that looks like. So it's not always this physical thing. It can be. Sometimes I enjoy that morning walk, but I sometimes I actually actively try to be like, look, you actually do need to be a little bit sedentary because your training load has been really busy. Or if you didn't know, I also serve tables. So maybe I've been working a lot and training a lot and I need to be off my feet. So it's walking to the bench to enjoy the sunrise instead of getting the physical activity in. So that's something that I do quite often. Another thing for me is having a morning where I don't have anything scheduled for like a good chunk of time, like 3 or 4 hours where I can just do whatever I want. Whatever I want. Sometimes that means sleeping in a little bit. Sometimes that means literally laying in bed and staring at the ceiling for 2 hours because I can. Sometimes I am putting on fuzzy socks and getting in cozy clothes and curling up with a cup of tea and reading a book. Sometimes I turn on a meditation or something, like it's just like this morning where there's like no limits. Now, at some point, there's going to be a limit probably. If I could take a whole day like that, and I do actually try to do that on a regular basis, at least once a month, where I have a day with absolutely nothing scheduled, including training, just zero. That feels really good for me, but it's not always possible. So if I can have like 3 hours with nothing and I can just do whatever I want, that feels pretty good. That fills my bathtub up. It's awesome. Feels great. Crafting for some people, like being able to actually take the time and pay attention to detail, to whatever that is, paint, draw, scrapbook, make videos, to photography, whatever that looks like for you. So maybe it's something like that. I also love nerding out on things. I'm a total nerd. Sometimes that's reading things for me. I really love trivia. So if I can go to like a trivia night with my friends or something like that, even if it's a late night, I know that that's going to fill my cup. So that feels really good for me. Or if nobody's available, or I'm busy on trivia night or whatever, I will watch Jeopardy. I am a total Jeopardy nerd, so I know what time it's on. I have TV. I will turn it on so that I can fill my cup up in that way. That is really fun to me. Like, I love to play board games. I play a lot of solo card games at home, like solitaire type games, because that also gets me excited, especially when I get to learn new ones and try to figure them out. I have a few also that are really hard. Um, I feel like such a nerd talking about all of this stuff, but I play a game called, I don't even know actually how to say it. It's like Belligered Castle or something. And It is really challenging. I have only ever won once, and when I did win, it's because I hadn't played it in a really long time and I forgot one of the like main rules. And I was like, oh, weird. Wow, I won so quick. This is so easy. I don't understand what happened. I was so proud of myself, and then I realized that I cheated. So I find things like that are challenging and kind of fun for me. So it doesn't have to be like, sometimes you would think like I don't have the energy to do these types of things, to go out with people, to like actually make the point of playing a card game or taking out all of my crafting supplies and actually sitting down and doing it. Maybe you feel like you're too tired to read a book. That happens quite often to me, actually. But instead of reading, I know a lot of endurance athletes are really love to learn. This is something that I see a lot of. So you might be reading all of these like books that are really intense and require a lot of mental energy. But maybe it's about switching to like a book that's like fantasy. I started reading fantasy last year and I'm like totally in it. Okay. So maybe you find something that's light and fluffy and has no content, really, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be like the best literature you've ever read or something where you're going to get something out of it. Like, just read for the sake of reading sometimes. So just really think about for yourself, like, what are these things that just and it doesn't have to be big drastic stuff, right? Like playing a game of cards by yourself or with your partner or with your family. Like that might put like a little bit of water back in the bathtub every day. But if you always do something every day to fill the bathtub up just a little bit, then it's not going to be so drained at the end of the week, which means that you don't have to do some big extravagant thing on the weekend to fill the bathtub up, right? So you want to be thinking about this on a daily basis. How are you stopping the drain, right? This is important too, because we are busy people, and a lot of times we have the tendency to drain until there's literally nothing left. So that we don't want to do that either. But like, how can you put the drain in? So take that physical rest as well, but also how can you fill the tub up? So we need a balance of both of those things on a, I would argue, daily basis, but at least weekly basis. And then thinking about some of those bigger things because like it's not going to be perfect all the time. Our schedules are busy, right? It's not going to be perfect all the time. And so we want to be able to have sometimes those bigger things, those big adventures, those vacations, and these types of things. How often do you need to schedule something like that for yourself personally? And this is going to be totally personal. Sometimes some people might need this once a month. Some people might need it once a quarter. Some people might need it once a year. How often do you need to have something a little bit bigger that is going to bring the water back up to that perfect, lovely level? Okay. One other thing I want you to think about when we look at this differentiation between resting and recharging is, of course, rest. Like I said, rest is super, super important for endurance athletes because you do actually need to spend some time off of your feet to help your muscles recover and things. And we do have busy schedules. And so we end up like, doing errands and doing chores around the house and these kinds of things in our free time. So we do want to think about actively resting. But I want you to also think about what you're doing when you're being sedentary. A lot of people end up doing kind of, I'm going to call them unhealthy. I don't think they're always unhealthy, but they tend to be because they tend to be more of a numbing activity. Social media is the biggest one. So like aimlessly scrolling for hours, that's not even resting. Like you might get some physical rest, but that is something that's actually going to be draining the bathtub. Watching something on Netflix, it can totally be helpful and resting and fulfilling. So I'm not saying Netflix is a bad thing. In fact, I watch it and I enjoy it, but I just want you to be really intentional about how you use it. So you're not using it just to numb something out. You're not using it every single day as your only option because these things can actually be draining for you when they become part of like the monotony and just a thing that you do because you don't know what else to do, because you're bored, because you feel like you don't have the energy to do other things, which we've talked about, right? Like you might not feel like you have the energy, but those other recharging activities, even though they might feel like they take energy, will actually boost your energy levels more. So I just want you to think about the intention behind what you're choosing to do. I had a client, hello, if you're listening, you're going to know exactly who you are when I say this. I had a client that told me that she uses social media. It feels like kids' cartoons on the weekend sometimes. And that's legit, right? Like watching cartoons on the weekends as a kid was like super fun, right? It was like a special thing, right? It was once a week. It was a very short thing. It was like an hour or two of cartoons that you got to engage in. And it was just like this thing that you looked forward to. So social media can be that, right? Social media can be entertaining. Like, I think that's half the point of it. It can be a place where you go to learn things, but it's also just remembering that you're not just jumping on it and doing it without any intention, that you're actually being like, you know what? I kind of want to go on and just watch some stupid videos and have a good laugh. Right? I watch funny cat videos. This is a thing I do. I don't even really like cats, but cats are hilarious. Like the videos people get of them just make my life. So think about that. What is the attention behind what you're doing? So I never want you to be like ashamed of sitting in front of the TV and just like chilling or taking some time to scroll through social media or whatever. That's fine, but just not doing it all the time, right? Not doing it as the only thing that you think is recharging your battery because you don't have anything for anything else. Okay. So that's the distinction. The other thing is like things like watching or checking the news is another really common one that's actually a drain. I don't know if this is a generational thing. It feels like it might be, but there's like a generation that just like every day at 6 p.m. the news comes on, or like maybe you're somebody that turns on like a news podcast and you just like listen in. The news is inherently stressful because the entire point of the news is to communicate typically bad stuff, right? The typically like I know that they try their best to put like those positive stories in, but when you think about like the percentage of like say an hour long news, there's like maybe 2 minutes of positivity and the rest of it is typically pretty negative. And even if you are consciously like getting wrapped up in it, your nervous system feels that because that stuff is scary. And their whole job, we have to remember that a lot of news, it is still entertainment. They still have to keep you engaged somehow. And so they are doing what they can to spin things in such a way that's going to actually keep you engaged. I'm not saying that the news, especially in Canada, I mean, maybe there's other places in the world. I'm not saying the news is corrupt or anything, but like we do have to be honest about literally what it is. Okay, so like they do have to do things that are going to capture your attention, which is something that oftentimes aggravates the nervous system, and that's going to be a drain. So just keeping that in check. If you want to stay in touch with what's happening in the world and stuff, that's totally fine. But maybe it's like, strategically using a news app and only looking at articles that in your local area instead of watching the world news, or maybe you only check it 1 or 2 days a week or whatever this looks like. You can set some boundaries for yourself, but knowing that the news specifically is something that actually really drains the bathtub, even though it's something that we do often that feels it's like part of the routine and things and oftentimes involves rest because we're often sitting while we do it, it's actually going to be draining the tank instead of filling it up. The other one that I want to highlight here is gossip is a really big one. So we get together with our friends, for example, and we end up sitting around in a circle and like talking about all the people that we know or mutual connections. Maybe we're talking about our partners or our children and our neighbors and all of these things. So there's like gossip and complaining are kind of two of the things that end up happening a lot when we get together and like catch up with our friends. I want you to be really, really conscious of this because you might be thinking in your mind, I'm going to spend time with my friend, and my friend gives me energy and charges me up and makes me feel good. And I really hope that that is always the case because your friends should be people that, you leave those interactions feeling really, really good. But sometimes what happens is we go and catch up and we just like basically tell a person mostly about the negative things that are going on in our lives and the challenges and the struggles and these types of things. And there's nothing wrong with sharing that information because I don't ever on this podcast want to encourage toxic positivity or that, you always have to be happy. Like we're going through stuff and we need our friends to support us through those things. But if that's the only things you do when you're with your friends, there is something to be looked at there. So reconsidering, how you spend your time, I guess, with your friends and maybe even your partner as well, if you have a partner in your life, of like how when you sit down at the end of the day and connect with these people, what are you talking about? And is that actually something that's going to fill the bathtub or drain the bathtub? Okay. And starting to maybe explore some other things like how can you do something different instead of just like going for coffee or going for a walk and talking. Maybe there's something else that you can actually go and do together that's going to fill both of your cups instead of draining them from gossiping and talking about negative things. Or maybe you intentionally, when you connect with your partner in the evenings, put in something like a rule or a game or whatever you want to call it, where you talk about the things that went really well that day as well as the things that didn't go so well. Okay. So just thinking about how some of the things that in your normal routine, looking at your normal routine and thinking about how some of these things like might feel like rest or recharging for you, or you might think that they are, but they're actually not. So just audit for yourself. What things in my day are actually like filling me up? What things are draining me? How am I balancing this? And what am I doing to actually fill the bathtub up? So reflections for yourself here. I want you to think about in your free time, are you resting or are you recharging? Or how is the balance there for you? How are you spending like those bigger chunks of free time? And how can you actually start to incorporate some recharging strategies into your daily life instead of just resting and numbing out and just like not actually taking the time to fill the bathtub up? I hope that was helpful for you. Just thinking really about that difference between resting and recharging, because I think if you actively start to do this with intention, it's always a thing that comes up here, being intentional about taking the time to actually do things to recharge you is going to make a really, really, really big difference in how you feel about yourself, about your life, how you feel about connecting with the people around you. Your stress levels are going to get lower, your energy levels are going to come up. That zest, that happiness, all of these things that we're really looking for are going to actually start to come to us. And because we're going to have bathtubs that are actually full instead of just always feeling so depleted. I would love to hear how you're going to incorporate this and maybe what recharging actually looks like for you and how you're considering the balance. So if you have something you want to share with me, I'm more than happy to hear it. You can drop me a message in my Instagram at Ignite Health Coaching, or you can always send me an email as well. I have quite a few people actually that email me and I love it. So please continue if you're one of those people, or feel free to drop me an email as well at jennifer@ignitemyhealth.ca. All of that is down in the show notes, so you can definitely have a look there and drop me a message and let me know. If you have any questions ever about this episode, about another episode, I'm always happy to answer them. As I already said in this episode, nerding out also gets me really excited and fills my cup. So ask away. I'm happy to nerd out a little bit with you and explain things through and help you to find some solutions. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. I wish you a day, a week, a weekend, whenever you're listening to this, full of recharging. And I hope that your energy levels are going to come up and that you're going to start to just really feel your best. Wishing you all the best. Take care, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Athlete Mental Health Podcast. I hope that today's episode has got you thinking and has inspired you to take action towards improving your mental health. If you're looking for more tools and insights on boosting mental health and sport performance, join me in my Instagram community at Ignite Health Coaching. Be sure to drop me a DM to say hi and let me know what your biggest takeaways have been so far. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to the podcast so you'll get notified every time I drop a new episode. Sending you all the strength and energy that you need to crush your training, racing, and life.